Today on the podcast, we are talking to Penelope Hart. Now, Penelope's husband has joked that her hobby is decluttering and organising. It's fair to say that she has thrown herself into her decluttering journey with gusto. So today we're going to chat to her and understand why decluttering has become such a key focus in her life and how it's helped her.
You're listening to the Declutter Hub podcast, bringing you tried and tested, no-nonsense tips and advice from the leading experts in decluttering and organising your home. Now here's your host, Leslie Spellman.
Hello and welcome listeners to episode 186 of the Declutter Hub podcast. I'm Leslie. Now in a moment we're going to chat to lovely Penelope all about her decluttering journey. But first I'd like to welcome any new listeners we may have this week. You're so welcome with us. And if you've been with us for a while, we're delighted you keep coming back to us week after week. But we'd love to share the love. So we would like you to leave us a review to encourage other people that struggle with clutter to find a way out as well. You can leave a review on your podcast player or on our website. So without further ado, welcome Penelope.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Excited to be here. This is your debut on a podcast guest. Are you excited?
I am, yeah.
So first of all, then, I'm completely fascinated. I am completely fascinated by where you live. Now, you live in a tiny island in the UK. Tell us a little bit about, because you're obviously from Scotland. We can hear those dulcet Scottish tones, but you live right at the other end of the country in an island. How did you come to be there? And explain about the island that you live on.
So as you say, I'm from Scotland, from outside Glasgow, sort of in towns outside there. And then I lived near Loch Lomond until my late 20s. So I'd met my now husband, but he was originally from Cornwall and he was living up in Scotland, and we met, and then he got the job on the Isles of Scilly, which is go down to Cornwall and head out 28 miles and you hit the islands. And he asked me to move over and I said no. And then 8 months later, after lots of persuasion, then I said, I'll give it a try, and that was 12 years ago.
Oh, lovely. It's quite interesting, really, because a lot of people who, well, all around the world, whether they're in the UK or outside of the UK, the two very, very beautiful parts of our lovely country, aren't they? So Loch Lomond, that a lot of people will have heard of, and then Cornwall and off the coast of Cornwall. Not many people will have gone to the Isles of Scilly, I wouldn't have thought, but maybe, I don't know. How big is it?
It's archipelago, so there's several, there's lots of islands, little rocks, but there's 5 inhabited islands, and I live on the main one, which is about 3 by 2 miles long, and the sort of all year round population is about 2,500 across all of the islands.
Right.
And then tourism's it's the main industry, so in the summer there's a lot of seasonal workers come in, and then obviously the visitors in those summer months. So it's very different from the winter to the summer.
Right. I'm guessing that it's completely idyllic.
It's beautiful, yeah. It is, yeah. It's a lot milder than, it's not tropical, but it's just milder all year round. It's much milder and drier than the west coast of Scotland, for certain.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm sure there are probably things that you've had to do differently with your decluttering journey based on the fact that you don't have perhaps all the amenities that you would have in the mainland UK.
Yeah, I think one of the main things for me is it's very important for me for things to go to useful homes and be used again. And so there's not as many outlets. So you haven't got the range of charity shops and people, to free cycle things too. But I think so far I've done quite well. I think on the flip side, because it is harder to get things in, people are kind of willing to take stuff and make do and upcycle and use what they can, because it's not easy to go to shops here, basically.
Yeah, exactly, a little bit more tricky. So tell us a little bit about your family situation. So you moved there 12 years ago with your husband, and now you've got 2 gorgeous boys that we see all the time in our forum in the membership. So tell us a little bit about your family situation.
So I moved over here. I'd been here a couple of years when we decided to get married, and then we had our first boy, who's now 7, and then we've had our second one, who's just turned 4. So it's just the 4 of us here and our little unit.
So cute, so cute. But with 2 little boys under the age of 7 comes clutter, and a lot of us can absolutely relate to that. And that's when you joined us in the Declutter Hub about a year ago, I'm saying, just short of a year.
Yeah, but I think coming up 10 months. I'm at 10 months now, I think.
And you've had the most amazing journey with us, which we're going to talk about. But so that people can get a feel for what your home was like before you started your Declutter Hub journey, tell us, what did it look like? How did it make you feel? What did it look like on a daily basis?
I think the first word that always comes to is overwhelmed. I just felt overwhelmed. I felt like I was drowning. I've always been a keeper. I've not necessarily been a shopper, but I've always been a keeper. And I was recently said in the forum how I'd moved here all the way from Scotland down, shipped things over. I brought scrap paper with me, a big box of scrap paper. And at the time, that seemed like a perfectly reasonable thing to do. So, we were really fortunate. Housing's quite difficult on the islands, but we're really fortunate. We have a lovely 2-bedroom cottage that was renovated not long before we moved in. And before the children, we had a spare room. But it was full. It wasn't unmanageable, but it was full. And then, as you say, the boys come along with all the extra stuff, and nothing went out, and more stuff came in. And I did get caught up in that thing of when you have your first child and thinking you need this and you need that, and a lot of it was secondhand. So in my head, that makes it okay to have it because you've not spent a lot of money on it. So then there's more and more came in. And then kind of coupled with that, I do struggle with like depression, anxiety. I'd had mobility issues during my pregnancy that I haven't left. So then that made managing the house a bit more difficult. And it just got on top of me. I couldn't see my way out of it.
Right. Okay. So a bit of depression, bit of anxiety after you'd had the children, and all the stuff that comes along with kids, and you're not on your own there. And how does anybody know that you don't need all this stuff? Because you just kind of go along with it, don't you, when you have your first child? And that's all part of the learning. So do you feel now that you have managed to work out what kinds of things that you do need? Do you feel that you've changed?
Oh, massively. Massively. I think I'd started to have a shift. I mean, I hadn't realised how depressed I was, and I went to the doctor about something else, and she asked a very pertinent question, and it just all came out.
Right.
And that was quite a big turning point, because I sort of realised, that I wasn't well. And then sort of through that, I became very fixated on the idea that I need to get rid of the stuff. And it was just this sort of general feeling of I wanted everything gone.
Yeah.
And I started collecting things together. And I think at one point in our hallway, which is a very narrow hallway, we had around 30 boxes, big banana boxes and big laundry bags full of things to go out. But I was trying to sell and go to car boot sales and have like driveway sales. I was trying to make it okay that I spent this money, and then selling it and justifying not keeping it by selling it. And then not everything sold, so then it was stacked up in various places, and I just wasn't getting anywhere with it. And then one day I came across your podcast, and I started listening. I felt a bit prickly about bits of it, but I kept on listening. And I think that was my defensiveness when you have a mirror held up to yourself and you don't like it.
Right. Oh, I mean, that's really interesting, actually.
But I kept on, I was listening to it, and then, some things started going to the charity shop that before I'd been trying to sell. And then I think all of it kind of went that way. And I thought, yeah, I've decluttered, I've done it. But the only thing I hadn't done was my sentimental things. And I was looking at your website and your sentimental course, and I was swithering about that. And then that coincided with you doing your May wardrobe challenge. And I thought, I'll give that a go, because then I can kind of test the waters and see what it was like. And it was just like this revelation that, that I hadn't decluttered properly and I hadn't changed any of my thinking. And I joined the membership, and it was just this complete eye-opener about how I'd approach things and how I could do it differently and how much better it would be if I did it differently. So I've probably gone off topic there.
No, you're not going off topic at all. It's really interesting because there's so many things in there that you've mentioned that will resonate with people. So the fact that you consider, it's kind of, I'm okay because I'm a keeper. And in this world, in the world where we're very focused on the environment, sustainability, of course, we want to keep things and not to waste things, and, not to be wasteful of things. So that's important. So we tell ourselves that is okay, which it is, until it's not okay, until it becomes too much, until it becomes overwhelming. You talk about the depression and anxiety, and then you had this urge to want to get rid of everything, because we know subconsciously, if we suffer with depression or anxiety, that having a house that's messy or chaotic or has too much stuff in it or is overwhelming is not helping us. And so, it's kind of like, well, so many people say, I just want to throw everything in a skip, or I just want to set fire to the whole lot and it will be gone. That it's that kind of thing. Like, I know that I want to do it, but I have not got the emotional capacity to do it, which is really interesting. And then, that kind of resistance that you had at the beginning, because I think we are all like, but they don't understand me, so there's loads of people who can declutter, but I've got these different issues. And actually, of course, everyone is completely unique and has a different take and has a different thing that's led them to the overwhelm. But ultimately, a lot of the emotions that we feel are similar. They might have varying degrees, but they are quite similar. And so it's interesting to tackle those emotions. And once you get to the bottom of which emotions it is that's holding you back, then it can take you a long way forward. Now, so you kind of came in through the podcast, thought, dabbled around, which a lot of people do, of course, think, I'm not sure, because people feel it's, it feels like it's such a big job that's going to take over your life. So it's a big commitment to come in and say, I'm going to commit to decluttering my house for a year or for a few months or whatever you want to do. So I understand that kind of reluctance to kind of dive in. But once you go in, then you realize you can do it a little bit more, one step at a time. And it's not this overwhelming task that we think that it is. Now, again, Penelope, you are one of our star pupils in terms of, we talked about this with Claire a few weeks ago in the podcast, and, you're a star pupil for Ingrid, and I love that when you follow our teachings to the letter. Not that we don't want people to deviate and do their own thing, but it's nice to see that journey unfold. And so you sort of dived straight into that and thought, I'm going to do what they say, which is follow the roadmap. I'm going to follow it to the letter, which you've absolutely done. So tell us about your journey going through the roadmap, please.
I think when I first came into it, there was that part of my brain that thought, I've decluttered. This isn't the area that's really bad. And as soon as I started the course for the kitchen, where you start the roadmap, I suppose I jumped back. I'm quite rule driven. So if I'm told that this is where you should start, then that's what I'll do. Right. So I started in the kitchen, but in the back of my head, I didn't think it was the worst thing. And I was just amazed at how much came out, and things like, and it's that what it's been for me is the emotions and digging behind why you're keeping something and what your real reasons actually are. And a lot for me, I've realized is guilt that it's given to me, or it's a waste of money, or all sorts of things. And we'd accumulated a lot of things. I'd had my house, my husband had his, we'd come together. The first house we lived in when we moved to the islands was an old lady had lived there. And when we moved in, the landlord had said, take anything you want, anything you don't want, give away. I kept it all basically because it was all useful and it was all good and there was no reason not to keep it. So I just had so much stuff, and it was really unpicking that. Well, why you don't need this number of spoons, you don't need, this number of plates. We've been given, we're really lucky, people have given us lots of lovely wedding gifts, and I had a good set of plates, and then the everyday set. It's unpicking those emotions for me has been the biggest learning, and that often you, Ingrid, talk about the stories that we tell ourselves, and I realized that a lot of the times I was telling myself stories about why I was keeping things, but it wasn't the real reason. And there's a lot of guilt, why I would keep things if they had been gifts or if it felt wasteful. But really it's that understanding of, what do I want? Do I want the space or do I want the stuff? And do I want to have to manage this? Is it really that important to me to have? And I started playing a bit of a game with myself that I would put, I maybe didn't go in as hard to start with. I would get rid of some of it, and then probably genuinely I knew more of it could have gone, but I would get rid of that little bit and then think, well, actually, yeah, that's fine. And then a little bit more can go. And particularly with the kitchen, I felt that gave me the confidence that nothing really bad happened and I didn't really need it. And I was okay, like I was making good decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's designed in that way, and I think, just jumping back to the beginning where you were talking about the fact that, we say, even though you're very rule driven, and I am as well, if someone says to do something, I'm like, okay, that's what I'll do. That's what they say. So that's a good thing. But you kind of think, why are they telling me to do my kitchen? I almost feel like I'm wasting my time because my kitchen's kind of fine. I actually want to do this horrendous room of doom that's been bothering me for years. That's what I really want to tackle because that's the thing that's worrying me the most. But what we're saying is you need to kind of start to learn in rooms that are simpler, and then you kind of build up this decluttering muscle as you go through. And then you're absolutely right. You start off in a room that's not, it's not that it's not important. It's very important because it's the hub of the home, but it's got less emotion attached to it. Generally, that's not to say that there's no emotions, because actually once you dig into the kitchen, there's loads of emotions in the kitchen as well. And you go and you kind of learn, but I know you've gone through the roadmap very systematically and you get stronger with every room as you go. And now I know that you're on your second pass in the roadmap, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But then you can look at the things that you did right at the beginning and think, actually, like you say, that was okay, and I can get rid of more, and that's going to serve me well. It's not just all about getting rid of stuff. It's all about keeping the right stuff. That's the most important thing. So you went through the whole roadmap. So which room did you find was trickiest?
I found the children's really difficult, and my sort of craft things. Yeah. And I think that the children's, partly because it's not just your stuff, so other people have an input, and partly because there's a lot of sentimentality, with everything to do with them. And I'm very sentimental about things. There's
no problem with being sentimental, Penelope, but the two things that you've highlighted as being most difficult, the emotions are very high. Your craft stuff is something that you absolutely love to do. So people are very, very loath to get rid of anything because they're like, I love this. You have really strong attachment to this stuff because it brings you great joy. And of course, your children, even more than the craft, bring you even more joy than your crafting sometimes, And so those are the height of emotions, and that's why it's most difficult.
And I think as well with the craft, and I've really been aware of this as I've gone through, and the concept of aspirational items, and that when I first heard you guys talking about that, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I can see that everywhere. Yeah. With the craft items, part of my brain says, oh, when the children are at a different stage, I'll do it. And then when I actually came to doing it, to being honest, I didn't do it before I had the children, when I had all the time in the world. And I still struggle, and I probably have kept more than I needed to, but it's all learning. But yeah, that aspirational aspect of things, and that's everywhere throughout the house.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we introduce you to more than anywhere else actually in the kitchen. And so that's quite an interesting one, because it is a bit of a light bulb that goes on for a lot of people in terms of, I'm keeping this for a life that I wish that I had, whether that's healthy eating or juicing or baking or whatever that might be. And so it is an interesting, and it is a real light bulb moment that goes a lot for a lot of people. So would you say that's your biggest light bulb moment, the aspirational side of emotion?
Oh, the aspirational and the guilt about keeping things.
Right. Okay.
That I'd never associated that was an emotion with possessions.
Right.
Guilt.
Okay.
That was
And it takes quite a lot of, you can't just, oh yeah, I feel guilty and let me fix that overnight. This takes a while, doesn't it? You have to constantly keep chipping away at it as well. And that's what you've done so well. Now, the one thing that I love about your journey then, Penelope, is that you chronicle it all the way through. So you put pictures in, before and afters, durings, you talk about what you're getting rid of, what you're keeping, the why, people, you're so inspirational to other people, which is what we love as well. But mostly you're doing it for yourself because you like the idea of looking back, don't you? It's really important to look and be able to see your own progress, because we forget how far we've come sometimes, and that's what you've done really well. Do you want to talk about how that made you feel and whether that's been a useful part of your journey?
It's been incredibly useful. It helps my thinking. So before I start, kind of clarifies my thinking. And then as I'm going through it just helps sort of clarify everything to me about what I'm doing and why I'm doing. And then it is lovely to look back and see, if I've said I'm going to do something and I've done it, because I flit a lot and I lose interest normally in things and I want to move on to the next shiny thing. So that's been the really important things to me about the roadmap, is it's kept me on task and it's kept me focused. Yeah. And when I do kind of veer off sometimes, and then I rein myself back in, and I find putting on the forum saying, I'm working on this just now, this is what I'm planning to do, I've done this, I haven't done this, why? And sometimes I could make excuses for myself or tell myself little stories about why I haven't done it. And sometimes I think, I don't want to write that on the forum, and I go and do it. Yeah. Not that anyone's judging you, but I'm like, I don't want to write that. I want to have done it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think you do our accountability thread every month as well, which is useful, isn't it? To say these are the kinds of things that I want to do. And as you say, no one's judging you. No one's beating you over the head with a stick at the end of the month saying, you said you were going to do that, Penelope, and you absolutely have not done that. It's more about keeping yourself accountable and saying, these are the kind of things. And actually, sometimes we look at those accountability threads and it looks, Ingrid and I keep a check on that, and sometimes it looks too much. And if we think it looks too big of a task to somebody, we will try and not rein them back in again, but say, have you thought this through? Is this really achievable? Because it's important not to demand too much of yourself and to be realistic with those goals as well.
The accountability thread, that was the main thing that started me off in the forum. Right. And I found that really useful to think and clarify in my head what it was I wanted to do, and then to have that midpoint check-in and then the end of the month check-in. And I did do at the beginning, I had too many things on there. I expected to be able to do too much, and in the past I would have become really disheartened, and it would have made me just give up on things. But you're Ingrid and other people have said, oh, do you think? And then I think I'm getting better. No, I am getting better at knowing, is that achievable? If not, and sometimes, like last month, I put 2 things at the end. I thought I may be pushing it, but in my head I'd already thought I may be pushing it, and I don't feel bad then if I don't do it. So just bringing that sort of reality into life about there's only so many hours in the day. What can you actually, and what's the most important things to spend those hours on?
So we're going to go to a little break now, Penelope, and in a minute we're going to come back about those hours in your day and how many hours in your day did you spend on your decluttering journey. We'll be back in a minute. Just a short break to let you know how you can kickstart your decluttering for just $1. Yes, we've opened up a 14-day trial to our membership with an Access All Areas pass. All the info you need is at members.declutterhub.com/trial. So welcome back. Now, before the break, I talked about the fact that I wanted to to quiz Penelope a little bit more about how much time she's actually spent on decluttering over the past sort of 9 or 10 months since she's been with us. So it seems that it has become your hobby, as your husband says. You absolutely love decluttering and organising, and you are very invested in what you're doing. But you've got 2 little boys, you've got a busy life, you work part-time. And so how do you fit this into your day? And how much time would you say in a week that you are decluttering and organising?
It's varied a lot to do with the different rooms. So when I did the kitchen, then I would do a drawer, a shelf at a time. And at that stage, I was naughty and would maybe start and do too much in not the right time frame and made it hard to tidy up afterwards. But that was more bite-sized chunks. I did that room. Spaces like the bathroom, I would take time out, maybe like half a day to do that. Then when I got to like the children's toys, so just their toys, not clothes, not books, just toys, I put my youngest son into childcare for the day. So I agreed with the children that I would go through their toys, put everything to the side that I thought could go, but they could then look at it and say if they wanted to keep it or not, because I want them to learn the skills. I want them to feel happy, not resentful about what's going on. And at the same time, I knew if they were with me, everything would just be getting put in the to keep pile. So it felt easier just to have them out of the house. And so I had 6 hours to work on their toys and I still wasn't done. And then had to do the rest sort of in the evenings. The attic space, we've got a small crawl attic space again. That was a day, and having to sort of ask my husband to, be in charge and feed them, and so I could say to the children, like, go and ask Dad. I'm not here effectively, but I've got better at it. It used to cause a little bit of friction because I would want to just spend all my time doing this thing that felt so positive. I get a little bit hyper focused on things, so trying to balance that in. But I think I've got quite good now that I've got a routine at the weekends. I normally have about an hour each weekend morning when I work on something. And then when we had like the Christmas holiday, that was when I was doing my paper declutter. And I'd agreed with my husband beforehand, he was off work, that every morning at this time I would have an hour to work on the paper. I had it set up so it was really easy to get everything out, work on it, and then put it away at the end. And that worked really well for us. And I had to be disciplined with myself at the end of the hour to stop, because once you get in a flow, you want to carry on. But it's not fair to the rest of the family. And yeah, so that's been a learning for me as well.
Do you know what, Penelope? I think from what we've seen though, and what you're demonstrating there is that you have been focused on decluttering for the whole of that 10 months in a consistent basis. You've not been working on it every single day. You might have done something once a week, but it's always been firmly in your mind. That's what you want to do. Alongside that, you've also looked at routines, reset some routines, and you've tried to get those nailed. And you know now that that's not a project. That's just something that you have to do every single day. And there are some times within the forum that we've seen that you are more focused on getting those resets and routines nailed rather than the decluttering side of things, which are ultimately, they work hand in hand. Of course they do, but they need to be tackled separately. They're a separate thing, really. One's tidying and resets, and one's decluttering, a different sort of end goal, really, although they're all involved. They all lend themselves. Sorry, not really making much sense there. Although they all add to having a fantastic house at the end of the day. So would you say now that your house is as you would want it?
No.
Okay.
But what I would say is when I started, that in terms of the decluttering, I'm really happy with where I am. I've got the sentimental items still to do, but they are all boxed, they're contained, they're in their own space. And I don't feel ready to tackle them at the moment. And I know that about myself. My routines, that's where I fall down. But I'm working on it. And I would say at the beginning, I've just felt like I was drowning and I just couldn't see how to get my head above water. And now I feel I'm like, I don't know. I'm in a little boat or a canoe or something, and I can see land, and I'm paddling, and I'm getting there, and it's all going to be okay.
I love
That's
that.
kind of
I love that. That's amazing. It's interesting to explain it in your terms, and it's just hard, isn't it, to bring to life sometimes how people feel about this. And you felt like you were drowning, and now you feel that you're on that kind of end stretch almost, you're doing that, but it's all about that consistency, Penelope.
Yeah.
It's all about that constant focus. And it's not surprising then that your husband thinks it's your hobby, because it kind of is, because you're getting great joy out of it. You're getting great joy about the rewards that have come with that. Now, at the beginning of your journey, and you've shared with us in the forum that you feel that perfectionism slowed you down a little bit. Do you want to talk about how you feel that you were perfectionist? A lot of people struggle with the idea that somebody with a lot of clutter or with a chaotic home can be perfectionist. And so how do you feel that perfectionist slowed you down, and what form did it come in?
Yeah, that was a sort of revelation to me joining the membership and realizing that about myself, was that if in my mind, if I couldn't do it perfectly straight off, I just wouldn't do it. Or if I didn't have time to tidy and sort a room until it was pristine, I wouldn't do it, which is it's a crazy concept now to me. Also, I would organize a space in a cupboard, and I would want it to be kept exactly like that. And I live with 3 other people who aren't meticulous, and that would really wind me up. And then, so I would give up. So what's the point? If it's not exactly how I want, what's the point of even doing it? It feels very silly thinking to me now, but that's how I was thinking.
But no, because that's the way that we want it to be. And so it's interesting just to compare the way that when Ingrid and I are working with clients, one of the biggest things that we need to do is that we need to manage expectations about what that might look like at the end. And so our whole job is keeping people and saying, if you choose to keep that item, then you're not going to get this vision that you've got in your mind about what your room wants to be. So managing expectations, it's different because there's a third party involved, but it's the same thing. Is you might not get there, and you need to be happy with the progress that you're making, but chip away at it, and ultimately it's all about the progress that you're making, and not that perfect end goal, because that might not suit you. And perfectionism is a real problem when it comes to clutter, because people just don't get started. And so it's interesting that you felt that as well.
And it's that compromise when you live with other people.
Yeah,
is been a big learning, and accepting that I can't control everything. I can't have it just so, and that's okay. That's okay. And if I can, so with the decluttering, I've been through the rooms once, and I'm going back through and tweaking it. And that, again, that's okay. It's this continuous thing, and life changes, and what we need changes, and it's never going to be perfect or done, because everything's constantly changing. Things are coming in, people are at different stages, and just sort of having acceptance with that.
Definitely. And I think that it's very exciting for us to watch you on phase 2 of the roadmap, because what we see is all of the learning that you've had in your sort of phase 1 of the roadmap coming into play. So now you're looking at everything in a fresh pair of eyes and thinking, I kept that on the first pass, but now I know that I don't need that. And so you're absolutely fine tuning. And the thing is, once you've gone through those mindset changes, which you absolutely have, it's never, ever going to be as bad as it was before. So Penelope, at the beginning of the podcast, you shared with us, thank you for sharing that you had depression and anxiety, and that you felt completely overwhelmed with your house. So how has that changed now? And what do you think you've learned about that?
I've had just a massive change in my thinking and how I feel about the house. Before, it used to just feel like everything was shouting at me, demanding my attention, needing to be done, something to be dealt with it. And it was just overwhelming, and just learning what kind of space I like living in, that I like clear surfaces, that knowing where things are, not running around trying to find things at the last minute, just all those little things, it adds up. And when you are struggling, it's just an added pressure. But just those simple things of being able to lay your hands on the car keys and your purse when you're walking out the door, having the children's things to hand as and when you need them, it just takes that pressure off. and knowing that I have a system for things. So there isn't piles of, oh, that needs sorted or that needs to go out. I've got my donation station. I've got my to-do box. It maybe hasn't been done, my to-do box, but I know where it is. My whole basket, I'm loving that at the moment, that, you know, I've got a basket in the hall where things that are in the downstairs that shouldn't be there, like the kids' pajamas, if they've got changed downstairs or something, they get slung in the whole basket. And it's lovely to be able to say, when another member of the family asks where such and such, well, if you check the basket and it's there, and it's not necessarily where it should be, but it's got structure and flow to it, if that makes sense.
It absolutely does, because I still do that, because, you know, obviously my house is fairly organised. I've had a basket for 27 years at the bottom of my stairs, and if something's not, I still say, check the basket. You know, it's the first place, because that's probably where it's going to be. If it's not in your room or where it should be, it's probably where it's going to be. Now, it was interesting to talk about the basket, because you talked on the forum the other day actually about a stair basket, and realizing that you had this stair basket, which is people love, and you realized it wasn't fit for purpose. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so so before joining the Declutter Hub, I'd obviously tried, inverted commas, lots of things to get myself organized, and a lot of it involved if I get this magic thing, it's going to solve all my problems, and, you know, without changing my behavior. And the stair basket was one of these things. My husband hated it. We've got narrow, windy stairs, so he hated it, felt it was dangerous, and it would pile up over the basket, up the stairs. It was really awkward when you go to the room to unload it, because it falls over and everything tips out. It wasn't big enough for the volume of stuff with the kids, so I got another one, which didn't solve the problem.
A bigger basket. Yeah, get more stuff into it.
So then I had two baskets which were overflowing and the stuff going up the stairs. So yeah, I dug my heels in, because my husband didn't like them. I'm silly, and
and then people were like, yeah, stair baskets are not all that, and you're like, oh, they do that too. Maybe the husband's been right all these years.
So I put them away in the cupboard, because I wasn't quite ready to admit and get rid of them, so I popped them in the cupboard. I put a crate I had at the bottom of the stairs, and after about 2 days I was like, yeah, those baskets need to go. This is I could lift the crate around the house to tidy up at the end of the day when I was doing a reset. It's really easy to carry up the stairs, to put stuff away. It was big enough for everything that we need. That realization that I need to empty this thing every day. It can't be left.
Yeah.
We just got too much stuff. The children are forever pulling stuff around the house. The stairway is clear. It's actually safe to go up and down the stairs.
And the thing is, it's so simple, because in our minds we think a stair basket, and I hope that people understand what we're talking about with that. It's a kind of almost like an L-shaped basket, isn't it? That kind of goes up at the stair and then across. It's really hard to explain, but it's like an awkward shape, and actually it's not got much space in it. And so it sounds like a fantastic idea, because if you're the kind of person who's always put stuff on your stairs to take upstairs, you think, actually, I can put that into a basket, and it's a great idea. But the problem is simply that the basket is not really fit for purpose, because you can't fit that much in it, and it's a bit awkward. And so that's a barrier. The bottom line is a stair basket, even though it sounds like a great idea, becomes a barrier that you don't use, and it's not useful anymore. And so actually, if you can get a square basket or a bigger basket or a crate, that will serve you much better. But some people haven't got space in their hallway or on their stairs to do that. But I've always had a square one, and it fits loads of stuff in. I can put, honestly, if I've got coats downstairs, shoes downstairs, they all go in the basket when I'm ready to take them up on a weekend, and chuck them all in and off they go. But you've got to compromise and work with what you've got in your house. But at least you made that realization, and that's the important thing. So we're nearly ready to, I could talk to you all day about your decluttering journey, because it's been so brilliant to watch. What's next for you? So you talked about sentimental. So is that coming next, or have you got anything else that you want to do first?
So I'm really as I said, I'm really happy with what I've decluttered. My boys' room, I'm sort of been doing the second pass through the different rooms and sort of tweaking things. And my boys' room, they're really ready. The youngest one's ready to come out of his toddler bed. So we're looking at getting new furniture for their room, getting some proper shelves and stuff in. And they're constantly growing and changing. So I'd like to have a go through their things again in sort of preparation for the change to their room. My husband has said that he will do the shed at last with me. So that, I wasn't planning that, so I've got to fit that in now. And I'd like to get that done before the summer, sort of springtime. And the sentimental. And I'm really, one of my biggest learning things with the Declutter Hub has been the importance of those daily routines. I had quite a boom and bust approach to housekeeping, sort of all or nothing. And that doesn't work when you have a family of 4. Yeah. And they're not a meticulous family of 4 either. So there's a lot of
meticulous family of 4. I'm just not sure that exists. Who's got one of those?
And the problem is I have a friend who does, so it's really difficult because you compare yourself to this.
Oh no, that's the word. I know, it's like, really? Like, yeah, I'm sure there's secrets. I mean, they're not too bad, but they're definitely not meticulous, that's for sure. Because, yeah.
So then really working on those daily habits and routines, and again with I used to sort of think it was like one day I would decide to do it and it would all be perfect. Just accepting that I'm working on it, and maybe some days I won't get it right. But if I'm getting it right more days than not, I'm always moving forward. And I have little talks to myself in the evening when I maybe just want to crawl into bed and I don't want to finish doing my kitchen reset or getting the bags ready for the next day. And I can say to myself now, it's always better when you do that. It's a better morning and a happier morning. And my eldest son, he has struggles going to school, and so it's quite challenging in the morning getting him out. And if I take that effort at night, then it just makes that morning that bit nicer. And so it's having those little talks with yourself about.
Do you know what, Penelope, you've taken me right back to the beginning, because at the beginning you talked about the fact that we tell ourselves stories that keep us stuck, and that's one of the things that we talk about in the Declutter Hub quite a lot. And now 10 months in, you're actually telling yourself more positive stories, that there are more good days than bad days, that actually, even though you want to do that crawling into bed at night, and we all feel that sometimes, you're like, I really, really need to do this. There's a voice inside your head saying, Penelope, that it's going to be better if you do this now and don't crawl into bed. So the trajectory of those stories has completely changed, hasn't it? And it's taken you into a really positive place. And I think, again, going back to what your husband said right at the beginning, that decluttering has become your hobby. I think that what I see, we take away a lot of those negative emotions associated with clutter, guilt, you feel overwhelmed, all of those things, but we don't think so much about the really positive emotions that come with it. So really, you should be super proud of yourself. And I think there is that as well. I can do this. I've done this. I've worked hard. And I'm proud of the house that I'm creating for my family, and the environment that I'm creating, and the positive effects that it's having on myself. And so really look at those positive emotions as well as the negative emotions.
I think I certainly used to, I would have always called myself a messy person. Yeah. I'm untidy. I'm messy. Why can't I do this? Other people are able to run a home. Why can't, and I don't do that now. I know that I'm working towards it, and I'm getting better, and I feel happier and calmer. Yeah. And I'm a nicer mum, because when you're not running around like a headless chicken, then you're calmer and you're more together, and you can take that breath and go, oh, it's fine. It's fine.
So I think it's fair to say, Penelope, that being part of the Declutter Hub has been positive to you. Is there anything else that you would like to share with our lovely listeners?
It's been truly life-changing for me. Sorry, I get all teary. I think what you and Ingrid have put together is just amazing, because I would read books, I would look at YouTube videos, and there's maybe useful bits and bobs, but to have it, to have the courses, to have the forum, to have the Q&As, just all pulled together, and it's just that constant support. It's not one thing, it's everything together, and it's leading you down this path. Everyone's cheering you on. You and Leslie you and Ingrid rather are always there cheering us on, telling us home truths when we need it, but in a really kind and supportive way. And just I couldn't do it. I tried doing it before and I couldn't do it. And I still felt really bad about myself. Whereas now I'm doing it. I know I'm doing it. I know I can do it. And I feel really good about myself.
It just shows you, doesn't it, that you just need, it's everything. Honestly, it's everything. When Ingrid and I thought about setting up the Declutter Hub, I don't think even we knew how powerful it could be for a lot of people. We knew what we wanted it to be because we knew what we had done with our one-to-one clients. But again, I think this is different because you're doing it yourself. And so in a lot of ways, it's more powerful. You know, we see the impact that we have when we're working one-to-one with clients. But when you're doing it yourself, you know, you're doing the hard work, you're doing the learning, you're changing your mindset, you're making those rooms change from a before and after. It's not us that are doing that. We're bringing you on and we're teaching you what to do and supporting you every step of the way. But ultimately, you're the one that's doing the work. And that's the thing that's super powerful. So we're really proud of what we've created as well, because we've got this beautiful, beautiful community of people around us now that are changing their own lives and changing the lives of the rest of the community with it as well. So, and, you know, it's important for there to be people like you, Penelope, who are willing to share, you know, things that are, being vulnerable as well and saying, actually, I don't feel I did this very well today, or, you know, like you said, there are things you're like, oh, I don't really know whether I want to share that because it feels quite alien, but it's important for the people to see the progress that you are making and to see that success. And you have been super successful. So we're absolutely delighted that you are a member, and we hope that you'll stick with us a while. We're waiting for phase 3 and phase 4 of that roadmap. We're not letting you go anytime soon. So thank you so much for everything that you've done. Thank you for sharing your story on our podcast today. And we'll see you around.
Thank you.
So before we go, let's talk about next week's podcast. Next week, so Penelope has talked today actually about flitting, and she's talked about decluttering muscle and things like that. And you might be thinking, what even is that? Like, what is she talking about? What are Leslie and Penelope talking about? Well, we have some decluttering jargon that we use all the time. And next week, we are going to be busting through that jargon. So you know exactly what we are talking about. So make sure that you tune in to next week's podcast, which comes out every Friday, and hit that subscribe button. So thanks so much for listening, and we will see you next week.
Thanks so much for listening to the Declutter Hub podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to us in your podcast player so you don't miss an episode, and we'll see you next week.